Hey folks, Brian Foote here. So, there is an influx of mixed information teachers out there right now. A lot of them are my age or 5 or so years younger. So a lot of them are in their late 20s, early 30s, mid 30s, up to about 40. And it seems like these players have all come into their power, and they are offering advice and lessons, very expensive lessons, most of them, on how to play more easily in the upper register. And they're basically selling a method that maybe worked for them in the way that they know how to explain it. And I'm actually not going to decry any of those teachers. Some of them have really good stuff to teach you. But one thing that it seems like most of them are not doing is explaining how important the equipment equation is. And how if your equipment simply doesn't allow your body to do things like play high notes, it almost doesn't matter what type of physical manipulations or air manipulations or tongue manipulations or chop stuff you do. If the gear doesn't resonate with your body, it can be completely and utterly impossible to get beyond a certain point. And where that plateau happens is different for everybody, depending on how your body works and what you think. So I'm not going to sell any particular method. There are bits of truth in all of the teachers' methodologies, and there's also things that are just completely false, demonstrably so. One of the only things that I tell any of my students who are working on upper register or endurance and range, which is basically all of them, everyone's constantly working on that. Doesn't matter where you're at, you're constantly working on it as a trumpet player. There are certain truths that have to do with the laws of physics. And I'm going to talk about mouthpiece for a second. And I'm going to make very general comparisons. A wider mouthpiece cup, regardless of facial structure, regardless of teeth structure, a wider mouthpiece cup, width, inner diameter, width, wider is more work to play high. Narrower is less work to play high. Always. Unless your physical structure does not allow you to go to a certain point in narrowness, which everyone has a relatively narrow range of diameters they can play on. And some people can play on a wider range of diameters, and some people can really only play on one width at all. They have a super narrow niche range. And then other people have maybe a size or 2 or 3. Either way they can go and they can manipulate. And then there's people who have like 2 disparate sizes. Like they might have, their lead mouthpiece might be a 620.62 inches. And then their orchestral mouthpiece might be a 670. Those are over 5 sizes, what most people would call sizes, difference. But they find that they manipulate those 2 differences well. And the only way you can figure out those sort of things is if you try a lot of gear, spending weeks and months and years trying out stuff. So some people they're like a 2 mouthpiece guy. They got their mouthpiece for endurance and range, and they got their mouthpiece for really rich tone and articulation. And that's very, 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 very common to have 2 mouthpieces. I'm more of a 12 mouthpiece guy, but I really, really only use about 3 or 4, and the other ones are just kind of for fun. But Anyway, equipment, super important. So first I talked about width. Narrower, if your lips can fit into it, narrower diameters are far less work, especially above high C. Far less work, if your lips can fit into them. Wider diameters are more work because you got to fit more lip into that, and then you got to get that entire lip across that wider diameter, all vibrating at a higher speed. You're working against yourself. You're working against the laws of physics. Unless you're one of those rare physical outliers who cannot use anything small and has to go really big. And in that case, you're, as I said, a physical outlier. Rare, very rare. Like we're talking like 1 in 1,000, 1 in 500, that type of rarity. So that was the width equation. Mouthpiece cup depth. Más profundo. Very shallow, deep. A deeper mouthpiece cup. A deep cup. More work to play up high. Always. Yes. Always. It's always more work. It's one thing to have the diameter thing. The diameter thing, there can be variation because of your teeth structure and where your high point on your top teeth is. The diameter thing is not as absolute as depth. Depth is totally absolute. A shallower mouthpiece cup, is far less work to play in the upper register than a deeper one. Deeper cups allow your lips to protrude in. They allow slightly less correct technique. They allow more muscling and manipulation of the chops. And they make the middle and lower registers really rich and full with a lot of mids and lows in the sound. And as you go up, the sound tends to get really small and thin and strenuous, and you have to really start messing with your chops to make the deep stuff work up high. And usually it's not in tune, and it just does not sound good. And it really stresses the face to play on something deep and try to make it work way up high repeatedly. Very few people can do it. Even if you can do it, you shouldn't. I'm telling you right now, you shouldn't be screaming on a B cup. 99.9% of people should not be screaming on a Bach B cup. They shouldn't. Just because Thomas Gansch does it doesn't mean that 10,000 other people should also do it. No way. No way. Physical outlier. Physical outlier. Don't base your methodology and what you want to do on one or two complete outliers who are just freakishly gifted. Base what you want to do on yourself. On yourself. Not on what some other person who's not you, who had a completely different upbringing into music, who has a different brain, who has a different lip, who has different teeth. Everything is different about them. Even if you play the same style, two players who play the same style, completely different ways of going about playing that style. So just because some guy that somebody knows plays lead on a Bach 1X or a Bach 1 and has double Gs for 4 hours a day, as many as he wants or she wants, that doesn't mean that you or anyone else can actually do that. You might as well, I'm not going to say don't try. You have to try these things. But deep cups, anyway, getting back to what I was saying. Deep cups, more work, especially up high. A little less work in the middle and low range because they allow the lips to really vibrate and get vibrant in those middle and lower ranges. Deep cups, more work. Shallow cups, less work. And that's always, always. Now to talk about my favorite aspect of mouthpiece design. See that little glowing throat size. This is another physical, we're talking physics here, an absolute. A smaller throat size, as long as you can keep your chops resonating with the air, a smaller throat size vastly improves endurance and upper register, consistency. Smaller throat, less work up high. Less variation in the sound. You have to work on relaxing the lips and manipulating to get a more rich sound with a small throat like this one. This is a 32. So basically, when I use a mouthpiece like this, almost the entire time, it takes a lot of the physical work away from me. It makes it much easier. But then I get to focus on my sound, because what a small throat doesn't naturally give you is a really rich, vibrant, warm tone. A small throat, especially anything 30 or smaller, the real small throats, you actually have to do work to get a better sound on those. So for guys who are already super bright on like a 27 or a 26 throat, you probably don't need to go to a 32. In fact, that's the parlance of people who have really, really good sounds, but physically are working too hard. Okay? Like me. I've always had a great sound. I never had to really focus on my sound. It happened naturally. What my problem was that the chop thing just never was quite right when I was on the bigger throats. I'm not sure why. I have great lung capacity. I'm not in the greatest physical condition right now, but I'm not in bad shape. And I didn't start consistently playing double and triple notes till I went to a 30 throat. And then I found these crazy double cups with 32s. And there's many videos of me playing triple C and higher, double A's over and over and over and over and over and over. And they're not the loudest double A's on earth, but they're plenty loud for any gig, plenty loud for any situation. If you're on a mic, forget about it. I mean, you don't have to be blowing down Jericho to make a nice double A on a hot mic. You don't have to do that. And that's what a small throat helps you with. Improves your endurance. And as you get used to that smaller throat, whether it's a 28 or a 29 or a 30 or a 32 or a 31, whatever it is, wherever your sweet spot is, once you get used to that small throat, you start developing ridiculous levels of control because you start manipulating everything through that small throat, and then your lips get extra sensitive and you gain a huge amount of subtlety. A deeper, more open throat in your mouthpiece makes subtle manipulation you have to be more direct and concerted effort. Because since everything's going through a bigger hole, it's not as intense and refined. So you have to like intentionally do all these ridiculous things. Whereas on a 32 throat, the smallest little subtlest thing you do is just flying through the horn, magnified, okay? Back bores. This is a medium small back bore. I've looked at probably 1,000 back bores in my life. Literally just stared at them like this. I look at the shape, I look at how it tapers. So in my mind, this is medium small. It's not tiny, but it's not even medium. It's medium small. Like if I was to give this a Warburton, because a lot of you guys will know Warburton backboards. First of all, this is a 32 throat. Warburton doesn't make any of those unless you custom order it. But this would be like a Warburton 5. Yeah, 5 or 6. So like on the slightly small, medium side. A smaller back bore will help your chops above high C. A wider back bore will help your chops below high C. And also, A smaller backbore helps facilitate a shallower cup usage. And a wider, bigger backbore, bigger than this one, definitely, will help get things in tune better on deeper cups. So there's really like a proportional relationship between like depth of cup, throat size, and backbore. And really it's not necessarily in lockstep. You can have some variation here, but like a super shallow, like imagine a cup shallower than this, which is, there's many cups that are, this is relatively shallow. There's many cups way shallower than this. Like anything Jim Manley plays on is maybe half this deep, seriously. So he plays stuff that's really shallow. He has a super tight throat entrance, usually to a 30 throat. That's his favorite, is 30. And then a very small backbore, usually with a thick shank terminus. And so he plays on something that's very narrow, very shallow with a very soft rim. It's very small throat, very small backbore. And then he likes a horn that's like medium tight to pair that with. He doesn't tend to play big open stuff. And that's how he manages his resistance and has the astounding efficiency, is because he plays really tight mouthpiece with a medium tight horn. And generally plays like he likes horns that are tighter than the stuff that I like.